This episode of Radcast Outdoors is brought to you by PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings.
Fish on! Hey, Radcast is on.
Hunting, fishing, and everything in between. This is Radcast Outdoors. Here are David Merrill and Patrick Edwards.
Well, hello and welcome, everybody. You're back again, so we didn't scare you away with the last couple episodes. We've had some great guests. I hope you've had time to go back and check on those. Today, for the podcast, we actually have Mr. Patrick Edwards himself in the studio.
Yeah, I'm here, and I guess I'm the guest today. Is that right?
I don't know. We'll arm wrestle over that later.
No, it's good to be back in the studio and do another great podcast, so I'm excited.
I am too. It's spring finally sprung in Wyoming. I don't know when it happened. We had 150 days under 50 degrees here in Wyoming. If you guys have been following the news out there, I am excited. I am looking forward to fall, but there is been some things going on for sure behind the scenes. So, you've been doing farm chores, working for sure, but I heard you got out and got to do a little R&R.
Yeah, I got to go out and do a little bit of fishing a couple of times, and literally it's been a couple of times, but both trips were record-setting, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So is it definitely quality over quantity then?
I guess for those two trips, it was quality and quantity. So just to let everybody know, if you haven't read about it already, but I set 2 state records in about a 2-week period here in April.
Back-to-back state records.
Yeah, so it was quite an experience, and I have a pending IGFA world record as well, so I'm waiting to see if that's a go or not. But I can tell you the application process for a world record, it's insane. It's a lot of things that you got to do, and you have to have lots of pictures of everything, which I didn't know at the time until, I'm looking at what the world record was and then the fish that I caught, and then trying to navigate how do I get all the documentation that they need. Who knows? I may get that one, I may not. But either way, it's 2 state records, and so that's pretty cool. One for a longnose sucker, which I didn't even know exactly what kind of sucker it was when I reeled it in. I had to reach out to a couple of different people, Jim Zumbo and Ben Linnell. Thanks for helping me on the positive ID. I'd kind of figured it out online by that point, but they helped me confirm that and beat that record by over a pound, which was pretty cool.
Shattered the current state record by a pound.
Yeah, and then a few weeks later, shattered my own record for the white sucker, which I caught back in 2020. I set the state record then. I shattered that by over a pound as well, and that's the fish that's the pending IGFA all-tackle world record. So,
well, congratulations, sir. I'm glad you got to get out and do some fishing. I'm quite certain I know where, but we'll leave that to be undisclosed body of water just because it is going to be the world record.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Let's knock on some wood.
I mean, it'll be public anyway. I mean, I can say it was the Wind River. I'm not going to tell you where on the Wind River, but it was the Wind River.
That's only like a 200-mile river, so
yeah.
Good luck. Tell us about catching the fish. You obviously snuck away from a day of work and threw some tackle in the truck. What was the weather? What was the mood? Let's hear the story.
Yeah, so I'll start with the longnose. I've been doing a lot lately, so I have the full-time job. I have Radcast, and I've got a Harvard course that I'm taking, so I've been
and the farm
busy.
And the kids.
Yeah,
so Patrick has extra time. If you guys need some projects done around, or just some advice on website design, sure, give Patrick a call. We'll put his phone number in the show notes, and
I'll forward my calls to David. Yeah, no.
Hey, good luck getting a hold of me.
Yeah, it's been busy, and it's been good though. The kids have been super busy with their stuff. I mean, we had wrestling tournaments going on, swimming and stuff, but I had like an hour and a half window where I could fish on a Sunday afternoon. So I knew where suckers typically are, and I wanted to go catch some because I wanted to try again some more recipes and do some things with them just to live on the edge,
Well, didn't Zumbo give you a sucker recipe that's that you've been wanting to try? We talked about that a little bit.
Yeah, so he and I've talked extensively about suckers, about canning them, about pickling them, and other recipes, and I wanted to try smoking them, and I made some fish meatballs with them. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but there was a whole bunch of stuff I wanted to do, and I hadn't done it for 3 years. I hadn't targeted suckers in quite a while because I've been on brown trout kicks here and golden trout kicks there and grayling and doing different species. And so I was like, I haven't done suckers for a while. I'll throw.
There's some open water. The weather was warming up a little bit.
Yeah.
Above zero.
Well, it was windy and cold down there, but that was fine. It was a chance to get out of the house and get some quiet, which is something I desperately needed. And I had.
And vitamin D.
Yeah. And I had a really small window between basically church in the morning and activities in the afternoon. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go and sit and relax and see what happens. So I get down there, and I was using a pickerel rig, which is just basically a large slip sinker on your main line, then down to a 3-way swivel, which has a hook, and then another line and a 3-way swivel and another hook. So you've got 2 hooks about that far apart, just about a foot apart. What is
the advantage of having, is it just you're twice as many hooks and leaders and you can... Or is one going to suspend the other bait? What's the thought process behind it?
The thought process is you have 2 places for them to bite, and it's within the regulations. So it's like, yeah, why not do it? And I mean, it's common from Canada all the way through the United States. If you're fishing for suckers, that's probably what you're using. And all you need to catch suckers is a fairly small hook. So I used a number 6 eagle claw, which is pretty small. And then just a piece of night crawler. That's it. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's super easy.
This is a lead weight, right?
Yep.
On your main line with a swivel, a small hook with a piece of worm.
Yeah. Okay. So it's super simple rig, basically casting onto the seam of the river from the fast to the slow moving current. And then what I was doing is just working it slowly along the bottom. And in Wyoming, you can use 2 rods. So some of the time I was fishing for walleyes too with a jig. And so, I mean, you can do that. But what I found, and I think it is a good tip for sucker fishermen, if you're trying to catch a sucker, best thing you can do is have the rod in your hand, because there's a lot of really little bites that I started to pick up on. I have a pretty good feel for what's going on. And I'm like, oh, there was a fish. Oh, he picked it up and spit it out. Oh, I could feel this, and started to catch a lot more fish than I normally do just by holding the rod in my hand. So then I ditched the walleye rod and was like, you know what? This is going to be a sucker meat haul. And I started catching that day. I caught in an hour and a half, I caught 3 white suckers and 3 longnose. The white suckers were all really nice. I mean, they were about 19 inches, so they were decent sized. And then the longnose that was the state record was 21 inches. And I was like, this is a big sucker. No pun intended, but it is a big sucker, but I didn't know, what the state record was for it or what the exact species was. I just knew it wasn't a white. And so, it fought okay, but suckers aren't known for their fighting. I mean, they fight decently, but I was like, okay, well, I didn't even think about it when I first caught him. So I actually lost some weight on him because I bled him. So I brained him and bled him, which if I had known it was the state record, I wouldn't have done.
There's a couple more ounces.
Yeah, because I would have had because he was 3 pounds, 15.6 ounces. So he would have been a 4-pounder if I hadn't done that, but that's fine.
You were wanting to eat these fish. So
yeah, exactly.
There is a little dichotomy there of, if you don't brain them and bleed them, the meat's not going to be nearly as good, right? So, and the whole goal here was to try some of these new recipes you got, right?
Yep. And we'll talk about preparing them, because I know people are listening and they're like, you don't eat suckers. Well, yes, you can, and they're actually really good. But anyway, so I bring them home, and I had them in a nice slurry and went and did the activities with the kids, and then came back, and I'm like, man, that is, because it's time to clean them. I'm like, I gotta figure out what this is and start looking things up. So I did, and then found out it's like, oh, this is a state record fish. So I'm like, oh crap, I shouldn't have bled him. I shouldn't have brained him, but oh well. So I went to the post office that next Monday morning, and they had seen me 3 years earlier with my white sucker. So when they see me come through the door with a cooler, they're like, another fish, huh? They knew what was going on.
You gotta put them on a certified scale, right?
Yeah. So you have to have a certified scale. It has to be certified within the last year. And about the only places to do that in Riverton are the grocery store and the post office, and the grocery store does not want you to bring your stinky fish
Absolutely,
in there.
they don't want your fish in there. They're not going to be very cooperative to getting you a weight on your fish. But the post office seems like a viable option.
They were awesome. Those folks were really kind, and again, they did it a couple weeks later with a white sucker again. But yeah, they were more than happy to help out, and went in there, got the weight, got the length. Then I had to go to the Lander office and see Joe. He's the head fisheries biologist there. He did his verification on the species, double checked,
that there's no lead weights in its stomach.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, people do that. If you haven't followed fishing, you can go watch those walleye tournament angler guys. They got prosecuted too. But anyway, yeah, so I got all the verifications done, and within a week I had a certificate, and I thought that was pretty cool. And then, then it came down to preparing these fish. And so I'm going to give you some observations about longnose suckers, and it's pretty interesting. I had never filleted one out, never dealt with one. The thing that struck me the most is when you get a longnose sucker and you take the fillet off, they have a black lining on the inside of their rib cage. And so you open them up and it's black. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I mean, because typically you open up and it's more of a white, right? Well, the meat's white and beautiful, but there is a lining inside that stomach cavity between the ribs and the guts that's black. And it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in a fish. I was just like, oh, that's weird. So anyway, cleaned them up, and I noticed that the flesh was a little bit more oily feeling. It felt like it had some grease to it, which is good when you want to smoke something. So I got all excited. Threw some in the High Mountain Seasonings Gourmet Fish Brine,
which we've already established is by far the superior. Sidebar, I mean, they may or may not sponsor us. I do care. Hans, you're a great guy. But seriously, we took, and we've talked about this before, we took your family best smoked salmon recipe. We took mine. We took my dad's, and these are all hand down. Oh, this is the best. And then we did the brown sugar from High Mountain Seasoning, and I think they call it the Kenai or the.
It was like the Alaskan.
The Alaskan, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a more brown sugar based, and then we tried that gourmet fish brine, and head and shoulders above all the other concoctions. Everybody's come together when it was done and taste test time. Everybody's like, yep, give me more of the gourmet fish brine. So I'm glad you had some of that on board. I'm pretty sure we're going to make sure we have a lifetime supply around now.
Yeah, so. we bought it in bulk. So, but yeah, so I did the brine, applewood, smoked it, pulled it out, and I'll post a video of it because I videoed this whole process. It tastes great. It's not trout. It's not grayling. It's not whitefish. It's not like any of those. It has its own flavor, but it's really good. And yes, they are extremely bony. That's why most people won't eat suckers. There's two reasons, right? It's the face that they have that throws people off, and the bones.
Face and the bones. But the old adage of put it on a cedar plank, cook it, and throw the fish away and eat the plank is not true, huh?
No, it's not. And I'm going to be busting more of these myths as we go, and people can shake their heads all they want. But we had Doug Stange on this podcast. He's been eating suckers for many years. Jim Zumbo's been eating them for many years. They taste just fine. They are really good. And they have a lot of oil in them. Yeah, so smoking the fish, they're really good to eat smoked, but then I wanted to take it a step further and try some other things because it takes a long time to deal with the bones and can be a little bit of a pain. So what I did was I took and I made, and it's based off of the fish recipe in Stephen Ranella's Meat Eater cookbook. He has one, an interesting name for the recipe. It's sucker balls with magic sauce. That's what he calls it. But I made sucker meatballs, essentially. I took that smoked sucker meat and I picked the bones out the best I could, but then I put it in a food processor and just
ground the bones in there.
Knocked the snot out of it, right, as much as I could. Then I mixed in some mustard, some mayonnaise, breadcrumbs, eggs, onion, garlic, a bunch of different things, and made a meatball with it. And baked them in the oven for 20 minutes at 350 just to cook the egg and the other stuff because the meat's already cooked. And then I made like a, kind of a Chinese dipping sauce that had, soy sauce and some chili paste and whatnot. and
some yum yum sauce for your meatballs.
Yeah, and then I had the kids just kind of go after it, and next thing I know, I started with 24 meatballs, and then there were 3 left. So they apparently liked them quite a bit. Krista, my wife, she really enjoyed them too. So, I mean, they went real quick, and they were excellent. There were a couple little bones that we had missed that we found in the eating process. So again, if you are going to consume suckers, be careful. Do it at your own peril, because there are some bones, and the ones I've been catching are big, so the bones are bigger. With smaller ones, I don't think it'd be near the issue. But then I made some pickled sucker with Jim Zumbo's recipe, and I filmed all this. Again, I'll put it out on YouTube, on our Radcast Outdoors YouTube channel, and you can go check it out. But it was pretty neat.
You guys are going to get to watch a potential world record get caught on YouTube. So that's pretty cool content.
Not the catching, but the preparing of the at least state record longnose. You know, okay. I can do that. But yeah, so I mean, the longnose sucker, it's a cool fish. It's different. It's a face only a mother could love. But I'll tell you what, they taste pretty decent. So I don't feel bad about it at all. I've had a lot of people reach out and be like, why do you even try to catch those? You know, why do you want to eat those? I'm like, well, why do you want to eat any fish? You know, they all have a different flavor profile.
Sounds like it might be better than a rank old midsummer warm trout that you don't take care of.
Yeah, for sure. I would take it over that any day. I mean, it's pretty darn good.
On a sidebar, Hunter and I went to a pond fishing just here recently, and we fished a pond that had freshwater shrimp. And he caught it, proceeded to catch. I think we caught 3 fish in the 14, 16-inch range. You know, not pan fryers, but not huge. And we're on the road, and he's like, we're keeping them. And he's I don't care if it's an inch log fish or a halibut. That kid's, once it's on the bag, we're keeping them. Like, you know, Patrick, I'm not a big trout consumer. Yeah, right. I was spoiled with Alaska, I'll admit, but I am pleasantly shocked that those freshwater shrimp eating trout, it was akin to lobster.
I'm sure it was good.
It had no trout essence at all, and he ate a whole fish himself. And typically we cook a fish, he'll eat half a fillet, you know, usually the tail section. He gets into a few bones and he's done. We're all done when we start getting bones stuck in the side of our mouth, right? Nobody likes that. So sounds like the food processor is key to this whole adventure here.
I mean, you can pick the meat off and really be taking fastidious. Your time. I mean, it just takes forever. And those bones, when you see them, they are something else, man. I mean, there's a reason that people are like, I don't know if I want to deal with that. Because, I mean, they are pretty brutal, but it's worth it. Again, those long nose are tasty. The white suckers, I think, are good too. So, yeah, maybe we should talk a little bit more about white suckers. So, on that trip that I went on, that initial trip, I didn't catch any real big ones, but I caught some nice ones. So it was a couple weeks later, my father-in-law was in town. Katie wanted to go fishing. It had just snowed that morning. It was freezing cold. I was not super motivated, I'll admit. I was just like, I suppose we can go. So we go down to the river, and it was actually fairly nice. It started to warm up. Sun came out. Wasn't terrible, thank goodness. And started fishing. My father-in-law caught one that was really close to my old state record dimension wise. And I was like, wow, there's some big ones today. And we started hammering longnose, started hammering more of the white suckers. Katie caught another one that was really close to my state record from 2020. And, you know, we're having a good time and just enjoying it. And then I had one hit and I set the hook and my rod stopped dead. Like it was a big fish.
Every hardcore fisherman knows that feeling of, you know, I don't care what tackle, where you're fishing, I don't care where in the world, you know, you get used to setting the hook and it's a fish, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a fish. When you set the hook and it's just like, you're like, am I hung up on the bottom? And then, oh no, that's a fish. That's when your heart always gets going.
Yeah, because I was not using a small setup for these fish. I was using a bait caster with a medium action rod. And when I set the hook and that rod just doubled over, and I knew it was a big fish. I was thinking actually it was probably a carp because it was heavy.
And those carp get up to what?
Oh, geez.
20?
Oh, 30 pounds. Yeah. So I figured maybe I had a carp on. started reeling it in, and it got close, and I saw it was a white sucker, and all three of us were just like, that's a new record. Because I mean,
you already know what the record looks like.
Yeah, it was obvious, and got it netted and got it up on the bank, and I was just like, man, I have never seen a white sucker this big. And then kind of in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I wonder if it's close to the world record, because I kind of knew what it was, and I didn't have a scale down there with me, but I was like, man, I wonder. So anyway, I did not.
Did you bleed this one?
I did not bleed this one.
You
I
didn't
did
make
not
that
brain
mistake.
it.
Okay.
I left it be.
So you got a couple extra ounces.
Yeah, hopefully. And so then I threw it in the cooler, but we caught like 13 nice suckers that day. The smallest was 18 inches. So, I mean, we did really well.
So what is the potential size? What's the true size, but what's the potential world record?
So in 1984, a gentleman up in Minnesota on the Rainy River, I believe it was, caught a 6-pound, 8-ounce white sucker. And I don't know the length. It doesn't have the length listed, but mine, when I got the official weight, was 6 pounds, 8.45 ounces, which would make it a tie. They do round down, but it would still be a world record. So, I mean, it's a big fish, and it's 23.5 inches long, 14-inch girth. So it's a decent sized fish. It's not as big as, a lot of fish I've caught, but it's nothing to, just kind of make a joke about it. It's like, yeah, that's a big sucker. Right?
Considering that fish doesn't have a very big mouth to consume those calories, he was a tank then.
Yeah, he was a tank.
Do you think it was a hen or a buck?
I'm sure it's a female. Yeah,
the bucks are always usually smaller.
Well, not always. I mean, I've caught some decent sized males, but this one was so girthy. I'm sure it's a female. And I mean, we'll find out at some point. I did vacuum seal the entire fish and freeze it, just because if there are any questions later, I want to have it, and be like, oh, if you want to double check it, you can double check it. But anyway, so we get back to the house, take some pictures, and I go inside and I look it up, and I'm like, oh man, this might be a world record fish,
A 40-year-old record that you're shattering that who knows stood for how long before that, right?
Yep. And I know it's a new state record, like no doubt about it. Like that's an easy one. So then I, leave the fish in the ice slurry and wait until I can get to a certified scale, which is on a Monday morning, and I caught it on a Saturday. So I go down and walk in with another cooler into the post office. And again,
Patrick.
Thank you to the Riverton post office for being so kind and letting me come in. And so I come in and get it weighed and do all the things, take a picture of the scale. Because then I learned about all the things you have to do a world record. I mean, it's crazy.
Not a state record, a world record.
Yeah, it is insane. Like the application, you have to have witnesses that do like an attestation of what you caught. They sign it. You have to have it notarized. You have to, all these things. Take pictures of everything. Pictures of it on the scale. Pictures of it being, measured. The measurement from the tip of the nose to the inside part of the tail, and then also from the nose to the outside part of the tail. So to the fork of the tail and then out. You got to do girth. You got to get a picture of that. You have to, it's like I told my friend CJ, it's pretty much everything but give him a blood sample in your firstborn. So go through all that process, take it up to Joe again up at the Lander office at the Game and Fish. He does a species verification. Just super nice guy, by the way. Wonderful.
What Joe think when you're back in after 3 weeks?
He's like, did it again, huh? And he got a kick out of it. He thought it was really neat. He's seen a lot of white suckers, he said, in his day, and it's the biggest he's ever seen. And so that's pretty cool because they do a lot of gill netting and they see lots of fish. But he said that's the biggest sucker he's ever seen. And so that was kind of fun. And yeah, did all the pictures, did all the measurements, got everything together. So also with the world record, what you have to do is you have to take all of the line. It's like a requirement of almost 50 feet of line. You have to send it in. Then includes all of your hooks, your swivels, everything. You got to send it in. What they do is they do line tests on it. And they also verify that you didn't do something that you shouldn't be doing, right? Like if you had a setup that's illegal or or whatever, against their rules, because they do have their own rules. And hopefully I didn't do anything against their rules. I know I did everything to the letter of the law for Wyoming, but I have no idea if I, breached their rules on that. But
so is there like line class in that as well? So like line weight classes, right?
Yep. So the IGFA does not do line class world records for all the species. They only do them for certain. So they don't have a line class record for white suckers, but the World Fishing Hall of Fame does in Minnesota. So potentially it's going to be a world record on two sides.
Plus a state record.
Yeah. Their all tackle world record on the Hall of Fame side is 7 pounds, 4 ounces. So that gives me something to chase next year. But their line class world record I did talk to their director. He said mine would qualify for a line class world record for sure. So, because their 7 pound, 4 ouncer got caught on like 6 pound test, and I was using heavier poundage, and mine's the biggest in the heavier poundage. So it would qualify under that rule, but I have to wait to hear from the IGFA before I can apply for the one through the Freshwater Fishing Hall of Fame, because they don't share information because they're competing organizations kind of. So, but I did get my Wyoming state record certificate like a week later. So that was
Thank you,
cool.
Wyoming, for making some things easy.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, and I think I'm the only person at least in this state to break two separate species state records that close together. I don't know for sure, but I'm fairly sure, because most people don't have two. I think there's a guy out of Casper that has the crappie and the perch record, and those were fairly close together. But I think I'm the only one that has two that close together. And I think he and I are the only two people in Wyoming that have two, or that currently hold two anyway.
So next year we got to get a third one.
Yeah, I actually have my eye on a couple of species already. I might do it this year.
There's a reason why Patrick's on the podcast, guys. He catches lots of fish.
And I'm just a nut about catching every species. I actually have my eye on shovel-nosed sturgeon next, and then also stone cats. Stone cats are like a really small catfish. They only get up to like 10 inches.
Little subspecies, and they're only here in one tributary?
They're in a few, but
okay.
I think the current state record is out of the Torrington area on the Platte River, but I'd like to bring it back to Fremont County because we have them here. And I was talking to Joe, our biologist, about it and just trying to get an idea of where I could go. There's also a chance I could get the black bullhead record because there's a place with bullheads. The shovel-nosed sturgeon I could get out of the Bighorn or the Powder Rivers. And, it's possible. They're a small cousin to, like a river sturgeon or a white sturgeon. They don't get near as big. The current state record is like 44 inches. And so I think I could probably do that if I can figure out where to even catch one. That's what I'm doing my homework on at the moment, when I'm not doing all the other things, but I'm trying to figure out where I can get one. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities. And some people have asked me, well, how do I go about chasing a state record? Well, the first thing is you got to figure out what the state records even are. So print them off. I carry one in my pack, so I at least have an idea.
How many times has somebody caught a state record and gone, I'm not keeping this one today, and turn it loose, and all they needed to do was go get it weighed and scaled. But you got to know what the record is first.
Yeah, I think it happens fairly regularly across the country that people don't even know what they have. There was a guy that caught the state record carp out of Morton. I'm sure there have been people that have caught bigger carp and just this is a trash fish, I'm going to throw it on the bank. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I think there's a lot more awareness. If you look at the state records that have been broken since the pandemic, the longnose sucker has been broken 3 times. The white sucker I've broken twice. Sucker species are starting to gain attention because more people are going out and fishing and trying to catch new things. And also people are throwing bottom rigs out. So it could be interesting the next few years, but someone will probably break that longnose record. I'm sure there's bigger ones.
Records are made to be broken.
Yep,
right?
and I hope someone does, because then I'll go out and try to break theirs. So I mean, it's just part of the fun. But yeah, there are several other records that I think I can get.
Well, some people sit around and dream about Ferraris or trips to Hawaii, and Patrick sits around dreaming about which state record he could. And you're also doing the research and the homework, and I guess you're doing a lot of testing, right? Testing theories, testing spots, and sometimes you go to a spot and you get skunked.
Yep. Happens a lot.
Do you give up and go home and never go sucker fishing again because you got skunked in one spot one day?
No, and that's the thing. Like, the best thing you can do is talk to your biologist and kind of see where fish typically are for the species that you're wanting to catch. And since I'm a multi-species guy, I might be talking to Joe about a tiger muskie. I might be talking to him about a sucker. It just depends on what I'm after at that point in time. But I'm one of those people that I just I'm always wanting to challenge myself to catch bigger fish of lots of different species. It's not just walleyes. It's not just trout. You know, I love tiger muskies. I think suckers are fun. I think carp are awesome. You know, they fight like crazy. Catfish are super cool. Sauger are awesome. So there's just so many things I want to catch and too little time, unfortunately.
You're obviously capitalizing on the time you do have, and that's
trying.
Kudos. I'm excited to see this come. And I saw the pictures. I was like, man, that's good. It's good for Patrick. So
that thing was fat. That white sucker. I mean, that thing was a tank. The longnose was decent size, but man, those white suckers, they get a lot thicker and a lot heavier. And there's some more recipes I want to do too. So I'll talk about that a little bit. Suckers have been consumed by native tribes for thousands of years. So when people say, oh, that's a trash fish, that's a bottom feeder, they're good for nothing but bait.
Halibut are bottom feeders.
Yeah. Well, and so are catfish, right? And it's like people eat catfish all the time. I think really what it comes down to with suckers, they get demonized just because they're a competitor for trout. They're a competitor for other things in the river.
And let's be honest, they are not as charismatic and as photogenic as a nice rainbow or a nice cut. I like a stringer of cuts looks pretty good. A stringer of suckers or whites, it's not a face only a mother could love.
Yeah, I mean they're not beautiful, but as far as
delicious,
as food goes, they are quite edible. And so I'm tired of hearing people say, well, you can't eat them. Because that's what I said growing up, because I didn't know. I was ignorant.
Don't keep that. You can't eat that.
Exactly. It's a bottom feeder. It eats trash. Well, define trash for me, because it's interesting. I've actually examined these fish and seen what they're eating. It looks identical to what trout have in their belly from that same stretch of river that I catch. They're eating bugs off the bottom.
They're in the same water, so they're eating the same organic biomass on some level. There's got to be some crossover, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe they're eating the remnants of what the trout didn't consume, but they're still...
Yeah, but I mean, and I might do this next year, go catch a rainbow trout out of that spot and catch a sucker, and I'm going to open up both their bellies and show people what's in them. Because they're not eating garbage, trash off the bottom. They're eating bugs. They're eating small things that they can find on the bottom. That's why they like earthworms and night crawlers, is because that's the kind of stuff they eat. You know, they're eating bugs. They're eating larvae. They're eating worms that are on the bottom.
If you can catch both species on a worm, that proves it right there. One I find we should talk about is lemonfish. I was working on a jackup rig, and I saw all these sharks swimming around. I'm like, what are those?
Lemon sharks, yeah.
Lemon sharks. And, a bunch of people, they swim on top of the water and consume anything that's biomass floating there, right? And a bunch of people are like, oh, those are trash fish. They're really dang good to eat.
Oh, yeah.
Those are really good.
Well, and see, I'm curious. I know where some of this comes from, but it drives me nuts. People say the same thing about carp.
Or antelope.
Yeah. I've had carp. My buddy Seth, he brought some smoked carp last year when he came. It was excellent. I was shocked. And I fried carp and it was fine. I fried sucker. It's fine. I've smoked sucker. It's fine. I think it just goes back to, they don't look as good as a trout, or, they
don't fight as good as a trout.
Well, I'll tell you, I'd rather fight a carp than a trout any day, just because carp fight about as hard as anything you can. Now, they're not going to be as spectacular, maybe. They may not breach the water, but I'll tell you what, pound for pound, carp's going to tussle with you. Now, sucker, yeah, they kind of lay over after a little bit. They have a little flurry and then they're done. But I enjoy fish that fight. And yeah, maybe carp aren't pretty, but boy, they fight hard. And that's another reason I love tiger muskies, because they fight like crazy. It's like getting hit by a freight train, But it's just interesting to me how demonized these fish get, when actually they're pretty fun to catch and they're available. There's lots of suckers, there's lots of carp, so why not fish for them? I guess that's kind of where I've come to, because growing up, carp got thrown on the bank. Suckers got thrown on the bank. We didn't keep them. We didn't care about them. maybe used them for bait.
Well, not with these recipes, and I mean, they'll be in the show notes and they'll be linked, and there's obviously more than just the couple recipes you have. I would challenge everybody listening out there who's got an inkling, go, and next time, instead of just leaving that fish on the bank, brain them and bleed them and put them in some ice water and go home and put the effort into seeing if they are table fare, because it sounds like they are.
Kind of goes back to the whole idea of stewardship. If it's a resource, why are you wasting it? You know, why throw it on the bank and just leave it? Now, granted, it's going to get consumed by something. You know, the birds are going to eat it, the raccoons, whatever. But if you could consume it and make a really good meal out of it, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I just don't understand the mentality. I mean, I do, because I guess I kind of do. Because, I mean, when I was a kid, I just believed they were just a trash fish and they were good for nothing, right? But
we do have that responsibility to pass it on. I showed you the picture this morning of, I took an hour and took the boys to a body of water here real close, and we on a PK lure snagged a I think it was an 18-inch bow, and we're on the hunt for a master angler for the young kid, right? That's what he wants to do, and I could care less about catching another rainbow, Patrick. I'll go fishing with you anytime, but you know, you say let's get out of bed at 4 a.m. and drive 2 states away, and we're gonna go catch big rainbows. Now Pyramid Lake in Nevada, I want to go.
Big cuts,
Golden Dorado, I want to go, but you know, to go throw power bait and sit on a lake, it's just not very high on my priority list. Now, when you have young kids, that's the way you catch fish. And we've heard it a dozen times here on this podcast. When you take kids fishing, you need to take them on a day they can get bit, right? Mm-hmm. But we banked this fish, and I'm really close to it. It's barely hooked in the corner of the mouth, not bleeding. It's like, let's just let this thing go. It'll be there for another kid to catch another day, right? Well, I got 2 boys that are screaming, no, don't let it go. I'm like, okay, you guys got to eat it. So tonight for dinner, we're having fresh rainbow trout. Now I'm sure it's going to be, you know, they're getting ready to start spawning. It's not going to be the greatest fish I've ever eaten, but the boys are learning a lesson that we're going to consume that resource.
Yeah. And I think that we need to harp on this a little bit, is that if you pride yourself in being a steward,
and we all are, whether you think you are or not.
You're either a good steward or bad steward. But if you think you're a good steward and you're throwing carp and suckers up on the bank, you know, and not utilizing that resource, I would challenge you to rethink your process, because 1, they are edible. 2, you can use them for bait. 3, you can use them for fertilizer. There's lots of uses for them.
I plan on, because we have a couple bodies of water here that have too many carp, and they are invasive. And I'm looking at the price of fertilizer going, you know, we could have some fun bow fishing and go get a couple cooler loads of invasive species carp, and we can put those in the garden, and they're going to make great fertilizer. And that is being a good steward, right? That's not wasting a resource. There's a specific task there that's being accomplished.
You know, my garden is kind of a funny place, because depending on the season, the kind of carcasses that are going into the soil vary.
Chicken, fish,
well,
deer.
It's like I've got, you know, it might be suckers one time of the year, then, you know, rainbow trout, then maybe walleye, then maybe who knows. But the carcasses, I always make sure that I put them back in the ground. Or, you know, right now I've got 5 feeder pigs. All the waste from the fish goes to those feeder pigs, and they eat it.
Is it waste?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is like,
I think it's repurposed, recycled.
Yeah, it's repurposed, recycled stuff, I guess. Food stocks.
I would have never thought, if you would have, you know, had this conversation with me 20, 25 years ago about being conscientious, renewable, green, right? I'm like, just, you know, that was not me. However, as I gain a few gray hairs, you know, utilizing resources to the best of your ability, it's not a bad thing.
No, it's important. I think each of us has a responsibility to take care of what we've got. And that could be, you know, utilizing a fish resource. It could be a lot of different things, but you know, it's something that I'm teaching my kids, is that, you know, suckers are edible. You know, we can utilize them for lots of different things. I have them on the video helping me out. You know, we made pickled fish, we made smoked fish, we did all kinds of stuff with it. And at the end of the day, there is a use. And, you know, for those of you who gripe and moan about carp and suckers and hating them in the waterways, why don't you catch a few, take them home, and find a way to use them instead of griping about it? You know, there's a positive way to deal with it. Get it and use it for something that's a net positive for you.
There is this bigger premise here of, you know, I've heard each person has their own agenda, right? Talk to a wheat farmer, they hate turkeys. Talk to an alfalfa farmer. They hate antelope. You know, talk to a cattle farmer. Well, we can't make any money because those elk are always down on our ranch eating our feed. You know, each person has a villainized species in their mind that really probably ought to be looked at in a different light. Maybe I might reconsider the wolves. I doubt it highly. But back to, you know, I've heard lots of people say, well, man, get them, you know, you got farmer A on one side of the road, farmer B on the other side of the road. Farmer A hates the turkeys. Farmer B loves them. And farmer B's turkeys keep going over and destroying farmer. And it's like, how about we, you know, kind of get a consensus here of turkeys are okay as long as they're managed. Elk are okay as long as they're managed. Suckers are okay as long as they're managed.
And whose job is that? That's us as the stewards of the land. And I believe that through and through, that it's our responsibility. It's our job. You know, I've been seeing a lot of stuff.
So you didn't leave your worm container there on the bank?
I did not. I picked it up just for you, David.
Thank you. Hopefully there wasn't any Marlboro and
I picked
Monster energy drink.
And I picked up a couple other worm containers and
a Monster can, right?
No, not that day, but I mean, I'm sure there will be when I go back to that area. There's always something. But the thing is, you know, we are responsible for our fisheries, for our hunting areas, and whether you put it there or not, you should be picking it up. My two oldest kids, they just went through hunter safety. We went out to an area where they do like a skills test, and they fire a firearm, you know, a few times and go through all that safety training hands-on. Well, we get to this area and people have just trashed it, man. There's garbage everywhere.
The training
and
area.
It's sad. Yeah, it's a public area. It's on BLM, but it's sad. People take their old washing machines out there or actually it's old refrigerators and freezers because they don't want to pay to take it to the landfill and have it taken care of. So what do? They take it out there, they drop it, they put tannerite in it, and they shoot it. It's like, you guys are very disrespectful of the resources that we have in the beautiful country that we have, and you're just littering. That's all you're doing. You're making a mess. And to shell casings everywhere.
Oh yeah,
it was horrible.
To have the idea that, you know, it's a little bit like the passenger pigeon, right? Oh, there's so many, just shoot them and forget about it and leave them. You know, I hesitate to be the greenie, but you know, that fridge could be recycled.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and why put it on the landscape like that? Like, why do that? That's just
I think
dumb.
It comes down to training. And just this last week while we were gone out in the woods, my son was having snacks and got up and he had a couple candy wrappers around him, right? And we had the discussion and I made him pick them up and put them in his pocket, right? I didn't just clean up after him and be the litter patrol. And I talked to him. I said, hey, A, the landowner isn't going to like that and you're probably going to get kicked off. And B, the next person that comes sits here doesn't want to see that, right? That does not enhance my wilderness experience to go to any place. I don't care what I'm chasing. I don't care what continent I'm on, to pull up there and see litter. Now, I've started leaving a 30-06 shell on the rock where I harvest a deer, right? And that's a little bit of a totem of the next guy's there. And we're not talking a bunch of other trash. We're not talking a box of shotgun shells. I'm leaving one shell. Yeah, I'm leaving it out in the woods and the wilderness, but at some point in time, some other hunter is going to walk up and probably take it home. However, it's almost like geocaching where you're, oh, hey, you know, guy, I wouldn't do that with a treble hook, right? Oh, look, I caught a sucker here. I'm leaving the treble hook I caught with it. Let's not do that. But yeah, I found it kind of cool, and I found some old 30-30 casings, and I'm like, man, 100 years ago, a guy was standing right here and probably shot a big old buck right here where I'm standing right, and I think it's cool.
Yeah.
So, however, that is a different level of consideration for the people in front of me. And I've gone to the level of, you know, when we're processing a big elk, yeah, there's a gut pile there and there's a carcass there, and it's a little bit messy for a little bit. And if you're not into hunting and you stumble across that, I'm sorry, but it's you, Patrick, you've butchered pigs and elk with me out in the woods. It's not it's not as cut and dried clean a process. But my little orange rubber gloves, I take my knife now, wrap it up dirty, right? Put all the dirty side inside, have the clean out, and I shove that in my pocket, and I come home and I throw those disposable gloves away after I pull my knife out. Now I'm not putting a really nasty, icky knife in my pants pocket, and I'm not leaving a pair of they're disposable, but those gloves are not going to just, you know, decompose in a day and be gone. No. They're going to be there for a season or two, and I don't want to go back and see my gloves the next year.
Yeah, but getting back to fish, like, there's no reason for people to throw their carp or suckers up on the bank. And also another thing, if you're going to clean a bunch of fish next to the water, dispose of the carcass appropriately. Don't just leave it on the walking path or just strewn all over the place. That's another thing that drives me insane is there's no reason for it. There's typically a lot of the places people are fishing, there's a fish cleaning station with a grinder. You can put the fish through that, or you can haul it away and throw it away yourself, or compost it. Like in Alaska,
they want you to fillet those fish and throw them into fast moving water, not leave them on the bank, because you're creating a hazard for bears, but you're also just a stinky, nasty mess. Decomposing fish is not lovely 3 weeks later. And some of these places you're fishing are pretty high traffic. I'd say there's somebody fishing there almost every day.
Yeah, there's people walking through there. There's people trying to recreate there. They don't want to smell your stinky fish. One thing that is really hard for me is around Boyson and the Wind River and different places. You have these carp carcasses up on the bank stinking like to high heaven
for weeks
when you're trying to fish. It's like, come on, guys, really? Like, this is not the place to put that. Either take it home, put it back in the water, do something with it, right? But don't throw it up on the bank and let it stink. There's no need for that. But anyway, I'll get off my carp and sucker soapbox now, because I've completely changed from what I used to be. It used to be, that's a carp. You kill it and throw it on the bank and leave it. Won't do that anymore, especially now that I've tried that smoked carp. Believe it or not, guys, it is legit. And now, granted, Seth knows how to take care of fish, so he did bleed it, brained it, did all the proper care of keeping it cold and doing a good job with it. But it is a resource that you can use for sure.
The same thing with the antelope, right? Everybody's like, oh, you eat antelope? Oh, you eat antelope?
Yeah.
Hands down, one of the better proteins that's running around the lower 48 right now is antelope. And I will put that up against anybody's anything, right? Oh, well, pig, oh, elk. No, it is better.
Yeah, it's all about taking care of it. But yeah, anyway, that's been the couple of trips I've been able to get out on in April was some sucker fishing. If you want to go pursue suckers, they're readily available anywhere in the country, really.
And you don't have to aim for the state record. You can just aim for the master angler, right? Start there.
Just have fun.
And learn how to catch the fish, and then go, hey, I've been catching a lot of these master anglers. Let's see if I can go after the state record. Isn't that how you would recommend everybody kind of, if they wanted to start chasing state records? Chase the master angler records first?
Well, I mean, unfortunately for the rough fish, the state of Wyoming doesn't recognize them for a master angler, so that's a bummer. But, I think that the biggest thing is talk to your biologist, see what's available where, see, what they eat and kind of how you can fish for them. For suckers, night crawlers are easy. I mean, you can go to just about any bait shop, any Walmart and find them, right? And so you use night crawlers or some kind of earthworm. You can dig them up in your backyard, but they're really easy to fish for. There's lots of videos on YouTube, lots of places to figure out different riggings that you can use. You don't have to use the one I used. Sometimes you can just put, some split shot and a hook and a worm on the bottom. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Now, will they come up suspended, or do you want that worm pretty well sitting on the bottom?
They're geared to feed off the bottom. If you look at their mouth, it's like a suction hose going straight down. So I always tell people fish off the bottom. You can catch them below a bobber, but you're more likely going to catch them if that bait is directly on the bottom. So you don't want to have it suspending and floating. You want it right on the bottom.
So what kind of leader length would you recommend from your weight?
So for mine, I was running about 18 to 20 inches of line in between a barrel swivel and that first three-way swivel, and then having about a half-ounce slip sinker on there because there was some current. And then, doing about another foot of line to your next three-way swivel, and then I just put the snelled Eagle Claw number 6 hooks off of those. I mean, it's a pretty simple rig. Doesn't take long to put together, but if you are going to fish on the bottom, you got to consider, are there rocks on the bottom? If there are, you probably don't want to use that rig because you're going to lose it. And then the other thing too, I was using heavier line, just knowing that there were some rocks in some rocky areas. And so
what weight line?
My main line was 12-pound mono. So just making sure that I had something tough enough that if I was going to get hung up on a rock, I could work with it and not break it off, because I don't want to leave lead and other out there in the water. So just something where I felt like I could get it back if I needed to.
I think I'm running 8-pound test for the kids for their PK stuff, and it seems to be doing just fine. But we're not. We're doing more top water. We are doing some power bait on the bottom, but smoother sandy beaches. So
yeah, and that makes a big difference. And there's suckers in that body of water that you guys were fishing, so you can always fish for them there. That's also it has 2 other state records out there, so it's just something to think about.
We'll have to. Maybe we'll put the kid on we'll chase him on the state record line. Well, that's the tips and tricks for getting out there, taking kids fishing for sure, utilizing some resources, having fun while you're doing it. Right, that's the most important part.
Yeah, and for me, it was just to get out and get some time outside. But I do want to talk about one of our sponsors. I want to talk about PK, because it is finally, the ice is gone, so it is time to get out the PK, especially if you have a walleye fishery nearby, which I'm going to really be transitioning to walleye here pretty quick. But if you want to pull like worm harnesses, they've got like 4 different options now for pulling crawlers. And I'll tell you. So
would you go with a flutterfish over a crawler over a flutterfish for walleye?
Off of one of their trolling jigs, certain times a year, absolutely. Okay. Like if it's May, June, and July, I can catch the snot out of the fish on their crawler harness systems. So the wobbler, the Dakota disc, any of those are just dynamite for walleye.
Now, are you using those from the bank or from the boat?
From the boat. Yep. Okay. So you'd be trolling them along, depending on where the fish are. It could be 5 feet of water and it could be 25 feet of water, but pulling them behind a bottom bouncer. So that season's coming up. And then, of course, their crankbait line, the Ridgeline cranks, that's the one with the lip that dives down. I'm going to be catching lots of big rainbows and walleyes on those, trolling those at about 2 to 2.5 miles an hour behind the boat here soon, behind planer boards. So go to pklure.com. You can get a whole bunch of those bought and ready to go. Also, this time of year, another great option that they have is that spin-a-jig. So putting like either a minnow or a plastic or a piece of worm off of that and fishing that along the shorelines right now for, walleyes that are in that post-spawn mode, it's a perfect option.
So I was using last week the flutterfish, the 1/2 ounce in that pond, and we switched down to the 1/4 ounce. The other guy that was with us there had a blue fox, and that flutterfish in that pond that nobody's fished so far this season, right, was I hands down smacking fish over that blue fox spinner.
That's awesome.
They were just crushing, and it was a red dot glow, just so everybody knows.
And good old red dot glow. It just is. It's one of the best that there is. And also this time of year, as soon as the ice comes off, this is a tip for everybody. Go out to where you have an inlet or an outlet and throw like a 1/2 ounce gold or nickel or copper flutterfish and just rip it and let it fall, rip it and let it fall. You will catch some absolute giant trout that way.
In fact, I think we'll be back out at that same body of water tonight. It was about 60% ice, 40% open. So we were having to throw kind of under there, and we could see fish darting out from the ice.
Cool.
So hopefully here in the next 24 hours, that ice is it was getting real thin and broke up. And so it'll be gone. And we'll switch that red dot glow out for a copper or a silver. And we're going to put the smack down on a few fish.
Yeah, no, I hope the kids have a good time. It's that time of year. Get your families out there, enjoy the water, be respectful and be kind and be a good steward.
Take your worm container and your monster can home, please.
Yes, and all your beer bottles and all those other things that you guys leave behind. But no, I'm excited. It's going to be a fun year. Can't wait to get my kids out as well and do some more fishing. Katie had a blast catching over 5 pound sucker. She thought that was pretty awesome. So
best thing to do is we're now, I didn't used to do this, but we now take a cooler because I'm a little more confident that we're going to be procuring fish to come home. Throw an old grocery sack in there, and right before you get done, have the kids help you just pick up. And if you took 20 grocery sacks, you probably could fill all 20 every time. But I feel like it's a good steward to teach the kids, hey, well, that's not ours. Well, we're going to pick it up and clean up the area that we want to come back and fish next time. And we'd put that on top of whatever fish we got in the cooler. We'd come home. I gotta wash the fishy gooky cooler out anyways, and I just throw that in the garbage can real quick. So
yeah, it makes sense. So yeah.
Have fun, be safe, get out there, and we'll be back for more Radcast Outdoors.
Thanks again for listening to the Radcast Outdoors podcast. We hope that you've enjoyed the show. If so, please go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this podcast and subscribe, share, and give us a 5-star rating, which really helps other people find the show. You can find all of our shows, recipes, giveaways, videos, and much more at radcastoutdoors.com. While you're there, please help support the show by purchasing a Radcast Outdoors shirt or hat. Please don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a Radcast community on Facebook called Radcast Nation, and we'd love for you to join in the conversation there. And of course, please help support our sponsors who make this show possible. Thank you again to PK Lures, Bow Spider, and High Mountain Seasonings. Until next time, get out there and enjoy the outdoors.